each time I put those carbs in, it went in at about that 3-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
500 grams gave me about 2,000 grams of weight, which is about 6 or 7 pounds. When I did the carb up was like 12 or 1,500. It did the same thing. I went from 196 to like 208, and I was 206 the next morning, something like that. It all it mathematically worked out actually really well, and there was no water retention at all.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Muscle Minds with Dr. Scott Stevenson. I'm Scott McNally, and all of our programming is brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. What's going on, man? We've had a couple of weeks off here. You were at I don't believe we call it Team Universe anymore. We call it The Universe.
It's fucking Team Universe.
You were at The Universe.
It'll always be Team. You know, it's funny. Years ago. How long ago was this? So my buddy, I just mentioned, Mike Gustafson, was doing the NABA Universe.
Yes.
Which was like 2 weeks before the Universe, or the NPC Universe.
Okay.
So he's a WFF NABA pro.
Yeah.
And that's like the whole intermingling in history of all those groups. But NABA is like the original, like that's where, you know, Arnold Franklin, those guys had their starts. It's still, I don't even know where it stands now in the UK, but NABA's been around for forever.
I'll tell you what it stands. So I talked to some of the guys about
North American Bodybuilding Association.
Yeah. So they're known as being like a very old school organization still. And I think they're a little bit behind the times because like that is at the PCA. I think that they're kind of on the cutting edge of everything. I think that NABA does, if I'm not mistaken, I think they do a straight through show that they don't have morning and night show. So they're,
Yeah. Well, what I meant by that, you're totally right. All that's dead on. So I think there's a split too, kind of like as there is in the IFBB as well.
Yeah.
This is like when the last time I looked at it, just because the personalities are strong and they just we can't all get along.
Right.
It would be too unhuman to get along and work towards a common cause. But so NABA was like it's up in like Pennsylvania, like the Northeast New England area. Okay. But there's also WFF. So NABA, or one sect of NABA, has joined with WF, and they're like an international.
Oh.
So they have a world championships and the Universe, and they float. Like he went to Pretoria, South Africa, where Arnold did the Olympia.
I'll be damned, yeah.
And competed there, and my buddy Mike. So he'll probably watch this or at least listen to it. So. Anyway, it was funny because I was 2 weeks out, and he came and stayed with me for a week because it was in Orlando.
Yeah.
Interesting weekend because there was like 4 bodybuilding shows in Orlando. This is long before COVID, of course. At that time, like there was that, and then there was like another a national organization, and there was like I think 2 NPC shows.
Okay.
All in one relatively small city, kind of cool. But I went in, and it was hot. It was summertime, and they're like, what class are you in? I'm like, I'm not competing. And it was all about Mike. I was there to help Mike, and they kept on like forcing me to like, come on, you should just jump in.
Yeah.
And they actually heighted me. That's the first time I figured out what my height was. I'm 5'8", which is good to know. I actually had that done again. I don't know if I should talk about that, but I had an interesting experience from the Universe this year. But anyway, that year they literally they heighted me, they weighed me, like this is where you'd be. They have like different levels of muscularity divisions. So at your height, they had like 4 different categories you could go into, divisions, classes. I don't even know what term they use, but so kind of like we have basically men's the board shorts, classic bodybuilding, and then open essentially.
Yeah.
So physique, classic, and then open. They had like 4 categories. I can't remember what they called them. And I was in like the heaviest one. And they're like, well, you could win. Huh. I actually thought about doing it because I could have like gotten a pro card in NABA WFF. Everyone was saying that I could. And I'm like, well, if I do that, then they're not going to let me go to the Universe.
Oh, yeah.
Because the year before I had gotten second at the Universe. So I was one place away from a pro card. So I was thinking, maybe, who knows? Didn't happen.
Put your eggs in that basket.
Yeah, but I'm like, it would have been funny. I I could have been like, had it all worked out, I could have been Mr. Universe and then Mr. Universe simultaneously in two different organizations, and no one would have known because it would have been on the down low.
Right.
So anyway, so many different things there, but I wanted to talk about, just because some people know this, but when I just compete because it's my thing, and then I want to take that information and then distill it and bring it back to people.
Yeah.
I've got some stuff to talk about other than this. Like, one thing that kind of people were flabbergasted about when I talked to them about it was that I do my own color.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I figured that out last year, and I did that for the Masters Nationals. I did that for the Team Universe this year. So easy.
It's
Liquid
funny.
sun rays, so easy.
Here's the thing, Scott, is that I did my own color. I was resistant to using spray tan until 2017, the last season I competed. And then I just spray tanned every time. And I'll tell you what, man, to me, I would say the exact same words. So easy, because I didn't have to do it myself. I didn't have to think about it. I just went in. Right. Had my sock or didn't have my sock, depending on what day it was, and got sprayed, sprayed, and then I went home. It was even. I didn't have to think about it. And to me, I think that there's a new generation. I don't think that they even know what you're about to talk about. This putting it on yourself, like that's
I know
archaic.
That's why I'm talking about it. Yeah. Well, here's the thing: if you were staying in the host hotel, the $200 a night host hotel
or more, right?
Just crazy, and you just have to walk down.
Yep.
And it's a smaller show. The time is reasonable. It makes sense. I think it was. They all get kind of blurred together, but it may have been last year when I did. Might have been the Team Universe, and I had an appointment set up with the host tanning, the official tanning group. And they sent me my time, late afterwards, and I was staying at an Airbnb to save a little money. And it's like, 3:30 a.m.
Whoa, yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God. So I ended up going with I just canceled that and went with I took the money and I just swallowed it, because I just didn't want, because I was going to have to get up and get like 2:45 in the morning.
That could affect your prep
anyway.
Yeah,
it's just awful. It's a terrible thing.
Yeah.
There's so many things that happen. I don't want to make this a bitch session. Like at the big shows where they have you, for instance, the Masters Nationals this year, they had us standing for. I didn't time it. It seemed like eons, but at least 45 minutes just standing. And because of because of COVID, there's no bands allowed, so there's nothing to pump up with.
What?
They moved you from the pump up area to a line, and then they lined up the three groups, and there was 20 guys in a weight class.
No bands.
So nothing, like not even flip flops. They just didn't want any mess back there, I guess.
Okay, huh?
Which normally, so there's no pumping, and you're just standing there, literally.
Wow.
Which affects everyone equally. So it's not like but it doesn't make for the best on stage appearance, I don't think.
Sure.
But back to the tanning. So you're right. You don't have to do anything. You have to think about it. It is true, and I will say this: sometimes you get someone like, okay, she's obviously, usually it's a woman with the man, not always, but most of the tanning that I've seen and done is mainly women doing the spray tanning. Every once in a while, a guy, because women can spray guys and women can spray women, but guys can't spray women.
Yeah.
So you're kind of that's not gonna work. But sometimes they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because they know how important it can be. And then every once in a while, I'll run into someone and they have a rough job. So don't get me wrong. Like they're dealing with all these crabby bodybuilders, who are like spaced out and ketotic and dehydrated. And, they say, turn this way, and they turn the wrong way and lift your arm, and they lift their leg, and they're all kind of fucked up.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine how unfun it can be if you don't take it with the right attitude, but you don't always get the best service. It's kind of a crapshoot. So, rather than having to drive over and take that extra time, I think it was one of the shows here in Florida that was driving distance from my house. Was the first time I did it last year. Liquid sun rays sticks on my skin like none other. I don't know what it is about the pH of my skin, the chemistry of my skin. Maybe they just have a phenomenal product.
Yeah.
I think the products are evolving over time, but literally, I think it cost me I've got a big jug of it now, but I used, I think, 2 little mitts. You can get them on Amazon. I think I maybe ordered one with a new bottle. I even used an old bottle the second time. It was a year old, just to see. I just wanted to see if it would go bad. Didn't go bad.
Yeah.
Like $9.
Yeah.
To tan myself, as opposed to 200 or 150.
I found with liquid sun rays, I like using a roller better. Yeah. I found that for me, I could get it more evenly. I had a weird combo that I really liked. Now, for me, liquid sun rays it sits on my skin a little bit dark, and I feel like it takes away from I have a problem with tanning, really.
It does to me, too. It takes away a lot. I look like I lost 6 weeks.
Yeah. So here's what I've done. I like the tone of that. I like the tone of liquid sun rays. I like the thickness of Protan. Protan is it's that real thin, but it's kind of weird color, like orangey, you know? What I've done is I've used liquid sun rays first, applied to that the night before, applied that Thursday night, and then Friday morning take a shower, and then it all washes off. But now I'm stained, and I have like a golden brown reddish stain, and then from there I apply the Protan and leave the layers of Protan on, and I'll do that like maybe 3 layers of Protan. Then by Saturday morning I have nice color, and it's still really thin. It's like Protan thin, but with that really nice color that you get from liquid sun rays. And I know they say like don't mix these, you could have bad reactions, but that's what worked for me.
I mean, it's been a while, but talking to Nikki Henry, Dave Henry's wife, who works for Protan, with Carla, everyone knows Carla Salati. She's been around, if you don't know who Carla is and you haven't competed in the last like 20 years at a major NPC show at least. So it's kind of a crapshoot. Everyone's got a different formula. Yeah. Like they were like Branch Warren, I guess, was someone who always had problems. He always turned green. Yeah. And they always had to figure things out for various people. Seems pH seemed to be one thing they kind of target. But yeah, it's a little bit different for everybody. So the thing with me about the liquid sun rays is I don't even know. I would like to do that, but I put it on, and literally a week later, I still have just as much color as most people do. Like some people, it comes all the way off; it's gone. Yeah. For me, it just stays forever. So, which I don't mind, but it makes it hard to do experiments because you can't get back to kind of a baseline no color situation. I can, at least, for a long while. And I find too that adds a complication. If you do back-to-back shows, the way the tan adheres to my skin, the first show, is different than 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later. And I found the same thing with clients too, that, usually it doesn't, that second time doesn't stick very well. We got a question actually that kind of, I have a question for you. Related? Yes, related. Corey Wright says, have you ever used tanning injections? So I think he's talking about melanotan. And let me take that one step further. Do you think back in the day when I started, Scott, we used to get a really rich base tan before we applied the color. Do you think we even need to have a base tan in order to get a tan, in order to tan nowadays? Because I feel like this stuff is so good. I mean, look at Ian Valliere. I mean, obviously one of his shows, he didn't look great this year. His color was a little off, but when he nails it, I mean, he's just as good as anyone else, and he's as pasty of a Canadian as you can get, Yeah. Sometimes the people who have the whitest skin, this came up on Fouad's podcast because Ian's on there, and so is James Hollingshead, and they're both pasty white. Yes. And James, I think James agreed with this, but Fouad's like you seems like you lose a little bit from your normal skin tone, Instagram pictures to what you see on stage. Yeah. And I've always felt that. Me too. That I lose a ton, and you can't not do it. I mean, really, unless, even guys who are the blackest, the black will still do it. Put it on. I think sometimes they lose something too. They like the most dark skinned competitors who actually end up too dark. Yeah, that can be an issue. That can be an issue depending on, and some of it's like the guessing with the lighting that they may have at the show. So true. Yeah, as far as the tanning goes, it's an interesting thing because tanning in and of itself, I mean, what you're doing is, it's an insult. I always use the tanning as an analogy for training. If you wanted to get a good tan, you wouldn't go to the tanning booth for 2 hours once a week. Right. You tan a little bit each day.
Yeah.
So it's an insult. It creates an inflammatory response. And that, could, I don't know. I'd have to really, really dig and dig and dig, but it's something where you're constantly, you're training your skin, at least in a certain sense, to deal with that incoming, in this case, UV radiation, and at least maintain some general inflammatory health, let's say, some resilience, which may impact how it deals with the chemicals that come with the tan.
Yeah.
So let's say you never have any chemical exposure, and this fits generally with immunology in a certain way. I don't know how much of a generalizability there is from tanning to using color, but if your skin's being tanned regularly, you're getting an inflammatory response. Actually, the same thing happens with shaving too. There's a little bit of an issue here too. Somebody else, you shave, and like for the second show, I didn't use a razor. I just did a buzzed.
Oh, okay,
I like that better. Yeah,
you can't tell the difference either.
Can't. And the hair grows back anyway to some degree. By the end of the day, not that you're being judged that night, but
yeah.
If you let's say for you exactly, if you tan on Thursday, you shave beforehand,
right? And
there's all day Friday, and like if you're a particularly hairy guy and you go 48 hours, you've got stubble.
Sure.
By the morning of the show anyway. So, but you want to avoid like some of that inflammatory response and the blurriness that can come with that by the irritation of the skin. So, but if you're constantly doing that with some tanning and some shaving, you develop some resilience at least against those two things that may have some carryover. This is what I'm guessing, maybe with the color. I don't know, but you're also going from completely white and totally trusting in the tan, the color that you apply to create the color of your skin. So, not that it can't be done, but like let's say you're going to paint your car or something like that, and you're going to go from one shade of green to another shade of green.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be you don't have a perfect spraying device for it, and like it's going to be a DIY type of job. If you're going from one green to another green, it's not going to be as noticeable if it's a little bit patchy than if you went from white to green. Right. You're going to have to put on multiple coats, obviously, just as you do with the tanning. So there's more room for potential error if you've gone from a totally white, untanned skin. And there's maybe something that goes on that interacts with having stressed the skin with shaving repeatedly and regularly and tanning regularly as far as what happens when you put the color on. So I think it's helpful to have that color there. Generally speaking.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Thanks for watching another podcast here at Think Big Bodybuilding Media. And thank you to our great sponsor, TrueNutrition.com, for making this all possible. TrueNutrition.com is owned by Dante Trudell, the creator of DC Training. He wanted to create a supplement company that offered high-quality, third-party tested supplements at a fair price. High-quality protein powders, just about every type you could think of. Huge variety of flavors, plus health and performance supplements. Check them out, TrueNutrition.com. And hey, if you use our code ADVICES, you directly support our podcasting. Thanks, guys. Let's get back to the program.
So you were initially we were going to talk about your carb up too, related to the show. So what happened? Because I know one of the last times we talked, you were like, I think I'm going to make light heavyweight. I haven't eaten carbs in 2 weeks, man. And you were getting pretty damn lean, So where were we going to go with this?
Well, we're going to go with what I'm about to tell you, the story of the carb up.
Okay.
I tried this last year. I thought, there's no way I'm going to make light heavy.
Yeah.
I got to like 207. I'm like, I just can't. I'm going to look too shoddy. But I was pretty close. I always get outsized because I'm not at the top of the weight class.
Yeah, yeah.
So I said, fuck it. I'll see if I can get there. See if I can do it. So basically, I dropped my carbs. I had a couple of nice meals after the Masters Nationals, and there's 5 weeks until the Team EU, I think it was. Okay. And basically, I had went keto for that entire time, with the exception of like one pseudo carb up test run.
Okay.
And I made weight.
Okay.
I got down there, and it was pretty fucking rough. It was just no carbs, a lot of 1,000-calorie days. Not a lot of fats on some days. I added fats back in to some degree once I knew I was going to get there. And that there's various nuances there. It wasn't. I don't like the look from just a bodybuilding ethos perspective. It was just I haven't been that small and that light.
Yeah.
For like 20 years. I got
wow.
pretty damn lean. You know, I hadn't been a light heavy since early 2000s.
Yeah. And
some of that was dieting down because I was on the brink. You know, I was probably losing some muscle just to be at the top of the weight class.
Right.
But this time, what happened basically is in the course of that period, I broke sort of one of my cardinal rules, knowing I was going to have to do this in order to get down to 198, and I didn't have carbs over the course of repeated workouts. And I trained, I think I estimated I trained everything 9 or 10 times with any incoming carbs before I did about a week out about a carb up test run.
Okay.
And I put in about 500, 600 grams of carbs. So physiologically, what that means is, one, I'm lean as shit. So, and I'm dry as shit because there's really all the adipose tissues have shrunken down. That interstitial space under the skin where the water goes first, if that's where you lost the fat first, has come down. So my skin shrunk down somewhat because I've been lean for long enough. It finally was happening. So there's not a lot of extra body water floating around. And the muscle cells are, I want to say, like, completely, when you talk about depleted, they were depleted. Like, there probably was no glycogen there because I hadn't taken any carbs for, 10, 11 workouts, whatever it was.
Sure.
So when you bring in carbohydrate, there's a couple things happen. The glycogen, the glucose is brought in. It's converted into a glycogen macromolecule, which includes a protein called glycogenin. And there's also an osmotic effect that brings in water with that. So that idea, I cover this in my book. We've talked about it before. I've talked about it on podcasts that you get 3 grams of water per gram of glycogen stored. That number actually is like a roundup of, I think, 2.6, which comes from a rat study looking at glycogen storage in rat liver. If you look at the data, they've tried to assess this in humans all over the place. It's highly variable in different circumstances. But if you, it's not a bad estimate, generally speaking.
Okay.
So if you consider the amount of glycogen that I could store from none to a super compensated state, and the amount of water that could come with that, it was a lot. Maybe 2,000 grams because my liver was empty and my muscle was empty.
Wow.
So that's 2 kilos. If you take that 3-to-1 ratio, let's just say it's 1,000. You take that 3-to-1 ratio, and there's 3 other kilos. So there's 4 kilos, or about 9 pounds of potential weight. Well, I wanted to see what happened when I added carbs. There's one other thing that has to happen when this happens. So cells, in order to maintain balance in terms of pressure inside versus outside, and maintain fluid homeostasis in terms of the intracellular fluid pressures and concentrations of electrolytes inside the cells and outside the cells, you got sodium, potassium. Potassium inside, sodium's outside. When you store glycogen, you pull water in, the cell gets bigger. It needs to maintain the potassium levels. It needs to pull potassium in.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
If you don't have any potassium, or don't have a whole lot of fluid outside from which that potassium will be drawn, and you're pulling in massive amounts of potassium because you're storing massive amounts of glycogen, because you're so glycogen depleted and it's all being just soaked up like a mofo, your insulin sensitivity is sky high. It's a very easy thing, at least conceptually and theoretically, that you could end up pulling so much potassium out of that extracellular space, which includes the bloodstream, which is providing potassium to the heart. Got to watch out with potassium levels in the heart. People who don't use like potassium-sparing diuretics, for instance, run into issues, cramping, all those sorts of things, cramping and all those sorts of things. You can end up hypocalemic, meaning low potassium.
Yeah.
Well, that's what happened, baby.
Oh, you went hypocalemic. No kidding.
Well, I didn't measure it, but I presume what happened.
Yeah. Okay.
And I planned on this possibility.
Okay.
But here's the interesting thing that's just sort of fascinating. This is sort of like fascinating from a physiological perspective. It's something I tell people just for the sake of safety and warning them and just being careful that this effect can be so substantial that you have to watch out for it. So when I did a practice run, I didn't want to carb up too much, just want to get an idea of what was going to actually happen. I put in I think 600 grams of carbs. I could go back and look at the numbers.
Okay.
I didn't dig them back up. And I put on I think it was about 8 pounds, something like that.
Okay.
So, and I didn't spill whatsoever.
I bet. Yeah.
And I started cramping about 4 or 5 hours into that. And I drank that water with it to kind of match what I guessed maybe you might get, that 3-to-1 ratio, something like that. And actually what I was drinking was diatonic water for the quinine.
Okay, yeah.
And I had a multi-mineral, and I was salting as well to make sure I had plenty of minerals so the body could handle whatever it needed. And I was adding a potassium supplement.
Yeah.
And what else was I doing? Taking massive amounts of taurine, and I probably took in 15 grams of taurine.
Wow.
It didn't matter.
Yeah.
The cramping was ridiculous.
Huh.
Most people would have freaked out and probably gone to the hospital, I think.
It was that bad, huh?
It was that, and so I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna, obviously I don't have to worry about this. So I just kept on adding water and more taurine, and I ended up drinking, I think, probably, 10 or 12 liters of water over the course of, 8 or 10 hours.
Now, did you say this was during?
Was
this during the mock carb up?
It's just the mock carb.
Okay,
up, yeah.
Just double checking.
I didn't take in that many grams of carbs. I didn't go for it all. I had some sushi, very, very soup, like tuna rolls and tuna pieces.
Yeah.
And some homemade fat-free pancakes. I think a sorbet.
Of course, you had sorbet.
Yeah, some sorbet, of course. When that's actually something I might. That's great because there's no electrolytes in there. There's no sodium in there. So it's.
Yeah.
And I probably you're going to need those electrolytes in order to maintain some balance, especially. And this is what Ken has talked about so many times. If you really depleted.
Yes.
And you really dried out and you do a shitload the day of a show and you shitload like crazy, you're not going to spill over for probably 24 hours.
Yeah.
You really got down and dirty, depleted.
Yeah.
And also, the shitload is a nice thing, and this is why it is not a bad approach whatsoever in this regard, because you're getting plenty of sodium, potassium, electrolytes. You're not trying to eat clean things like sorbet.
Mm-hmm.
Sorbet is sort of a tool for me, because my body likes those carbs, but it's also basically free of sodium, potassium, those sorts of things that could cause issues. So you know what you're getting. It's just pure carbohydrate, essentially.
And you know what, too, I would like about that? It's free of volume. Because if I'm loading for a show, one of the things I realized I need now is to keep my stomach small, flat. I want to almost be hungry now, I think, is my new thought when I'm ready, A
lot of people don't eat anything the day of the show.
Yeah.
It's just reason. That's kind of what I end up doing too. Didn't eat much, but I didn't need to after I'd filled up.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and also if you look at the weight relative to the number of grams, it's about a 3-to-1 ratio in sorbet, so it matches that number too. But the main take home is that I expected some cramping. Because of this impact on pulling potassium out of the blood into the cells as I was loading. And I did everything I possibly could once this sort of came on. I did some prophylactic taurine and some minerals, but I wanted to make sure it was dry increases in muscle volume, fullness, not spilling over. And literally, Scott, I would be like, I'd finished my carbs. I'm like, okay, I think I'm good. Literally just pouring the sea salt out, doing this, and there's the taurine, 1,000 milligram things of taurine, and drank another liter of water. And I'm like, okay, good. I think I'm good to go. I kind of flex my foot. My calf doesn't cramp. It's like, okay, good. My back's not cramping.
Yeah.
Probably problem that day too is I trained legs that day because I just I didn't put the whole week together. I just wanted to throw some carbs in the seat just to figure out what I actually ended up figuring out. It was a very smart idea.
Yeah.
When I look back on it, and I'd just lie down and start to fall asleep, and all of a sudden,
geez.
My hamstring would go, and I'd try to straighten my leg out, then my quad would go.
Yeah.
And then I'd try to push myself out of bed with the other leg, and my glute would go on that side.
Huh, okay.
So, and we're talking like really, really strong, all out contractions, like in the middle of the night type of contractions. Luckily, I got all my stuff there. So I go through the same rigmarole, kind of stretch it all out, give it some time, 5 minutes of agony, lay back down, start to fall asleep, think I'm past it. This happened all night long, the whole night. So it was pretty bad. When I came around for the actual show, the weigh-ins were Thursday. I weighed in, I made weight, but I didn't compete until Saturday.
Yeah.
So it actually worked out in my favor. I did all the things. I doubled up on all, like the taurine and everything. I still had the cramping because I didn't take many carbs, and after that I went back to no carbs.
Okay.
I still had all that cramping. I got closer. Wasn't as that bad, but I basically didn't sleep that Thursday night, which was okay because the night before the show, I slept the best I ever have.
Nice.
It was amazing, dude. I've never slept before show. I had like one of my best nights of sleep in the whole prep.
Wow.
Because I was so tired.
Wow.
I think it helped my look the next day because I actually slept like a regular person.
Okay.
So the bottom line is that you need to be careful with that, and it can be remedied to some degree because I was able to pull myself out of it, but I was so I was telling my buddy Mike, actually, when I did my first couple shows, you may remember this, like it was very, very different phenomenon to have gone through the dieting process and really pushed that hard. Mm-hmm. So kind of a no man's land, and it's you lose perspective, I think, on that after having done it for so long, because I've done so many contest preps and I know how to do that. I just can sort of walk through it in a certain way. Yeah. I've been there, done that. This was a diabolically difficult diet.
Oh yeah.
In order to push my weight down that far.
Yeah.
I knowingly was like pushing really hard. So I don't know many people who would ever truly get into that scenario that I was in, where the body was just sort of like not knowing what the hell to do to process those carbs. Mm-hmm. But that is a phenomenon that can happen. This was a question that Ken got asked, I think, on the Book and Gear.
Yeah,
show.
he had said it actually had come up with one of his clients, and that's how he learned about it initially. Yeah. And so it's something he has to watch out for. Now, let me ask you. So if this is this is that you the potassium is getting pulled from your bloodstream, it's going to the muscle. Mm-hmm. And you're supplementing with taurine and sodium. Why not supplement with potassium?
I did.
Oh, okay. Because I didn't hear you mention that.
Oh,
so
I
wasn't. Okay.
Yeah, potassium gluconate. I actually have it's like K factors. It's in one of the boxes around here.
Okay.
There's various forms of potassium. Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Usually, like potassium gluconate comes in like 99 milligram pills, and that's like 1% of your already. They don't want you to mess with your potassium too much.
Right.
But I took in a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, you can. Sometimes people will go. They use like sweet potatoes and things with high potassium levels. You can go the wrong direction.
Yeah.
But potassium can be a difficult thing to balance, and the way to sort of think about this is literally, and this is a solid piece of empirical evidence that what people talk about can really happen is when you carb up, you will get drier at the same time. Because that water is getting pulled from outside the muscle cell, which is in part under the skin, where you don't want it, inside the cells.
Yeah. And
what that means then is that when you compare those two compartments, inside the cell, muscle cells, and outside the muscle cells, you're relatively speaking dehydrating that extracellular, extramyocellular compartment outside the muscle cells. Mm-hmm. You're dehydrating yourself.
Yeah.
In terms of what the neurons are seeing. The neurons are outside the muscle cells, and when you get cramps, it's a function of what the neurons are doing. The neurons are the ones that are having a hard time maintaining the membrane polarity, and they're just spontaneously depolarizing. Then that's when the cramps come on.
Okay.
So you're literally dehydrating yourself in a certain way. So the key is going to be water, probably taking in more water and potassium and sodium. I always say like throw a little bit of everything in there, but a practice run is super duper important.
Yeah.
Especially if you've gone like I did and did what I did to try to make it was a really, you can tell I'm still excited about like having had the chance to do that experiment. I don't, I may have looked like I just stepped out of a concentration camp or something like that, and I kind of did. I don't like the look at all. Pictures never do justice. I have a picture, I think, at pre and post color that I can put up that shows I was in pretty good shape. But I don't like that look. It was too withered away. But what I learned from that, and like this piece of information and this experience is just invaluable.
Yeah.
Like, I think I got third place out of like 5 or 6.
Okay.
In my class and in the over 50s.
Okay.
So, none of that really matters. I could have gotten last. I could have gotten first. But what I got to learn was really pretty wild.
That is cool.
I will throw this out too, just because it was funny. Like I had a laugh with another of the competitors. So I went in, and they've got so many people they're trying to shuffle through for the weigh-ins.
Sure.
I got there early. I literally got there like an hour beforehand so I could get in line and get in and out and then start to eat.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to make sure I had time to get the carbs in. If I had the cramps, then take the carbs out to stop the cramps before I got on stage.
Yeah.
So I wanted to maximize that time. So I go in, I'm like the first guy through, and these are mainly women are checking in you were competing the next day, or maybe even, I think just the next day.
Okay.
So I go through on bodybuilding. I need to weigh in. They wanted to hype me. Like you don't have to hype me. I'm bodybuilding. There's no hype.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, we got to hype him, don't we? I'm like, no, you don't have to hype me. You can, but
Yeah.
it's not part of what I'm doing. I'm not in classic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they didn't know. I was like literally the first guy through, I think, on that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went over and I said, so I put in my application as a heavy.
Uh-huh.
But I've dieted my ass off, and I should make light heavies.
Yeah.
I even got down. I was 196 when I left, just to make sure.
Holy
you never
shit.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very light.
I intentionally did that. And I think they weighed me in even less than that, because the scales are always a little light, but sometimes they go the other way. I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah.
Didn't have to want to fuck around with that and get back in line. The line was like 400 people long or something like that. So
yeah.
the guy's like, he's like, I'm just weighing you in. Whatever you weigh, that's your weight class. I'm like, okay, just want to let you know administratively that I'm going to be in a different class than what I registered for on my paperwork. Yeah. So it doesn't matter. He's like, I don't care. Okay.
Okay.
So it's all good. So I went through and did that. Gave my music the whole DJ thing was funny at that show. There were some people listening here who probably went to that show. The DJ he dropped the ball on so many routines.
Oh, man.
It was bad. It was like I was actually looking forward to seeing what I was going to get. Like, what am I going to get to post to?
Some Miley Cyrus maybe or something.
Yeah, who knows, right? So the morning comes. They do the over 70s, over 60s, over 50s.
Long day. Even if you're just doing the over 50 and over, Yeah.
Well, we're right off the bat. So the older guys are first.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not they
got up there pretty
give age preference. Yeah, which is nice. I like that actually. Done earlier. So they call the light heavies and they don't call my number.
Oh gosh.
So I walk over to the guy. He's a young guy, and he was perfect for that job because he's just like a take no shit New Englander. Like, get in line, do what I say, pipe down. Here we go. Come on. If you're not here, then screw you. That's it. So I went up and I said, hey, I've actually made weight for the light heavies, but I'm probably not on your list because I didn't register as a heavy. Didn't know I was going to make light heavies when I put in my application. He's like, I don't have you here. I'm like, I know that. That's why I'm telling you this. I said, could you check on that? Because I'm in the light heavies. Mm-hmm. I made weight, and that's the class I'd like to compete in. He's like, you're going to get on stage one way or another. What's it matter? And he literally said it was very close to that. I'm like, well, it mattered all those days when I felt like I was in a concentration camp, trying to get down to this weight class. So it was very intentional that I don't think he competes. And
obviously
empathizing
not
with me in the least.
I'd love to give this guy a shout out right now.
Yeah, no, I mean,
no.
I'm not him.
There's no. Fuck him. Sorry, fuck him. I'll say it.
It was kind of interesting. I'm like, I didn't know even what to say to him because he literally kind of. So he gets on his phone, his cell phone, puts his headset in, calls somebody, tries to figure it out. I'm waiting there, and he's like, I'm waiting here, and so it's like, okay, so they bring us back. So we have to go through the catacombs and the underbelly of the hotel in order to get back to the backstage area. Mm-hmm. And so he runs us through, just put me at the end of the line, and then he says, okay, and he turns around and he walks back down to where we came from. And he doesn't say anything to me. I got no confirmation if I'm in the weight class. So I walk up to the young ladies who are expediting, and I said, so here's the deal. The guy who just brought us up, he was going to check on this, but I haven't heard. I don't know that I'm on the list for this weight class. Mm-hmm. And she's like, what? I said, well, I made weight. I registered. I told him the whole thing again, you know.
Right.
Luckily, the guy who weighed me in.
Yes.
Who was the guy, who like, he's like, I don't give a shit. Like, he remembered that. And I'm actually glad, you know.
Yeah.
He actually said, I can't forget the hair, is what he said. He was like, you know, pushing us through pretty hard then, but he was totally cool backstage, very relaxed and cool about it. He's like, oh, I remember you. I was like, yeah, you weigh like 196. I'm like, yeah, there we go. He's like, hold on, let's confirm all this, like, just to make sure. But he remembered off the top of his head. He's like, I don't know why I remember that shit, but I do. So literally, they're confirming that I'm in the weight class as the first guy is going out and doing his mandatories.
Some people would freak out.
Down to the last minute, yeah.
Yeah, some people would be losing their mind backstage about that.
Oh, I mean, you know, it wasn't like I'm going to, you know, win or like I knew it was.
You were going to get on stage either way. It doesn't matter.
I mean, it's like I'm not the bikini competitors. You know, I'm on. All that matters is that I'm on stage. It doesn't matter weight class or any of that kind of thing. So again, here's even this. You're gonna love this. So I did the over 40s as well. You might as well, you know, it's extra 250.
Sure.
So they call the light heavies, and they don't call my name. So I went up to the guy and I said, hey, I think the same thing probably happened. He looks at me. He's like, what? And I said, I was in the over 50s. I made the light heavies. We couldn't have me. He's like, what? I was like, oh, yeah, you. Okay. Well, what did they ever figure out? I'm like, well, I made the light heavies. He's like, okay, hold on. And he did it like had to do a miniature version of that.
Yeah.
And when it went back up, it was very easy that time. But it was like, I figured that would probably happen because, you know, they're not going to switch me over. But it was really, really funny. He was just like, you're going to get on stage one way or the other. And I'm like, I knew I made weight. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. It wasn't like, you know, like you guys. In fact, I didn't get upset, like lose my mind, because like I had. It's kind of like there was. It's like if I went in and like, you know, I'm the plaintiff and I'm having been shot by someone, and there's video footage, you know, because it was in the stadium full of people. Like, the evidence is clearly in my favor that I'm supposed to be light heavy. If you guys don't get me to that class, it's not going to look good. Like, you guys, I know this is going to have to happen. There's just no way it's not going to go down this way.
Yeah.
You know, like if it does, then, and obviously it was fine, but I wasn't concerned that, you know, they're going to drop that ball. And they do. I've seen that before in shows where they bring someone out and they have, you know, someone come out with another weight class.
Uh-huh.
You know, sometimes because they were late, or I think because they'd made an administrative error. But anyway, so yeah, I did, and I was probably like, I think I was 206 on stage.
Okay.
Yeah, after the carb up, because I held that weight.
Wow.
It just stayed. Yeah, it just stayed.
Oh, I guess so.
So yeah. Anyway, so that was the main thing, is just to share the cramping thing, and I literally had to do the carb up a whole day early, which I normally would anyway, but there was no water to drop.
Yeah.
I literally, I was just dry as shit. So that's the thing. If you have dieted down that hard and you're really that depleted, you can kind of carb up and fill out. And water is, like, I have a peak week protocol that does seem to help many people. And part of that is literally just giving them something to do.
Yeah.
Boxes to check, you know, here's some sort of structure. Mm-hmm. Rather than relying upon it all kind of coming together magically, it gives them, you know, basically just a plan to follow.
Yeah.
As opposed to just trust that your car is going to get you there, because the autopilot is going, like, now you have directions, you can actually feel like you're in control. But if you dieted down and pushed that hard and really are that depleted, you're not going to have to worry about water. There was no water. I don't know. I could have drank, like, gone into the convenience store and grab the pickle jar they have, you know, and just drank a whole, you know, whatever 5-gallon thing of pickle juice, and I wouldn't have held water. Yeah, because I was so depleted and so dry. So there's a lot of truth to that. And I got to do what I like to do so much, is like, so I knew that was the case because I'd seen it previously in various forms, but now I got to, like, really push kind of beyond that line. And each time I put those carbs in, it went in at about that 3-to-1 ratio. Yeah. 500 grams gave me about 2,000 grams of weight, which is about 6 or 7 pounds. When I did the carb up was like 12 or 1500, it did the same thing. I went from 196 to like 208, and I was 206 the next morning, something like that. It all like it mathematically worked out actually really well, and there was no water retention at all. Like I didn't push it to spill, which I normally would have. I didn't want that cramping to carry over. So my next time, if I probably won't go down to that weight again, but ideally I would have spilled and then dropped the water. That's the point of filling and spilling, which is Ken's term that I borrowed from him. Because when you spill, you know you've glycogen supercompensated and then some, and you're getting this is what I think happens. There's a backup effect where that glucose doesn't get brought in. There's no more room to store it, so it gets sort of like the line leading to the bar, backs up till it's outside. Yeah. So the glucose is not in the bar, where it would be pulling water in. Instead, those patrons, the glucose molecules are stuck there, and they're pulling water to that intracellular or extracellular interstitial space and hold water. So I would have liked to have done that, but I was scared if I did that, then the cramping would have been an issue on stage. I didn't know how long that was going to take, so I cut it off. And I also, those carbs when they went in, even though I hadn't been eating carbs, like my body's just sponged them up.
I bet. Yeah.
It was crazy. So it was a really like the extreme of the extremes that at least that I've experienced when pushing the weight down and with the food and everything else. And I got to really kind of test in a full-blown experiment those notions of if you're in shape, that you're going to fill up really well, you don't have to worry about water. Yeah. How much weight will you put on, theoretically versus what actually happens, and it all was pretty cool. Like it's like you're run. It's like NASA. Like we've got all these calculations that gone into launching the rocket with the fuel and the propulsion and the angle, and it actually went off the way it's supposed to. Yeah, yeah. And so that was pretty cool. So I just wanted to share some of that as well as make people aware that the cramping thing can happen. So be ready. Yeah. With anti-cramping.
That's cool. That's cool, man. Yeah, so much to learn doing it yourself. I feel like and even like we look at your last the previous season when you competed, like we still get questions about like you eating high protein in that prep today. Like, we're still learning. Yeah. We're still learning from it. That's cool.
Yeah. And the thing too is that I did when I was doing all that training without any carbs. The pump was I got some kind of a pump, but it wasn't like anything. And what I've noticed too, and I've told people, and I've known this for a long time, when people do the fortitude training stretches, you don't have much metabolic stress because you don't have the glycogen to foster the production of those metabolites. Yeah. The lactic acid isn't there because the glycogenolysis sucks because there's no glycogen to do glycogenolysis with. It's all gone. So you don't get a pump, and the stretches don't hurt the way they do. Okay. Then you come in after a show and you're nice and full. You've done a carb up, and those stretches hurt like shit because one, the muscle's bigger and fuller. There's more metabolites there. And there's low pH and all the other things that give you that pump feel. But I was getting like no pump, but I ended up hanging in there pretty well in terms of strength. Just, the sets would, and this is just, people ask me these questions, I mentioned this before, but the thing my sets were bonking. I could tell the bonking would happen. In fact, it kind of happened early on, but you notice like when glycogen gets lower, there's sort of a bonking effect. You know what the bonking term is from marathon, from the endurance world, what bonking means? Yeah, we kind of talked about it before. Yeah. But, go ahead. Marathon runners, like the amount of glycogen they have and how fast they use it, if they haven't glycogen supercompensated at like around mile 20, they'll run out of glycogen. Glycogen is superior in terms of providing ATP for energy during the running. So when you run out of glycogen, the speed of running will kind of go down and they just hit the wall. That's the bonk. That was happening during the sets. And I would just kind of keep on going, but I could feel that happening. Like there's almost, it got to be like there was no bonk. There was just, the muscle was like kind of a little bit non-responsive in a way, which I just battled through. But first I went from feeling those bonks because the glycogen level was getting low. And then I went to where like there was no pump, but I just kept on training hard and I didn't lose much. I just, metered it out and just dug in, but it was interesting as well. Just so that was another aspect of what happens with glycogen use and the pump and those sorts of things. So the stretches I was like, I'm stretching as hard as I can. It just doesn't hurt because there's no metabolites. There's nothing there. Yeah. So anyway. think that's all of those are the main insights
for today. Well, I'm sure there'll be more. We have a bunch of questions. You had some from Instagram. We got about a dozen more while you've been talking. I did want to tell you a little bit about my training, because I managed to hit a personal best yesterday on the dumbbell incline press, which has been one of the lifts I've really been working on. I just realized it's been a year since I've been working on that. And I'm just now. What's that?
That's how it happens, man. Just keep plugging away.
Yeah, it's been a year. And it was about a year ago that I did a set with the 110s, and David Smith told me that my form wasn't really good on him, that I wasn't really using a full range. And I started talking to him, and initially I was like, because it was the best I could possibly do. And my thought, and I told you on the show even at the time, I was like, I'm really excited because now my goal is to not go any heavier than this, but try to get better with it. But I didn't quite know how much better I could get with it. And then after talking with him more, he took a bunch of time and explained to me cues on how to get better with that lift. And now I can bring the dumbbells all the way down, really good form. And I feel like I'm a lot safer too. And just overall, I feel like I'm in really good control. I feel like I've used progressive overload, but I'm just now using the 115s. It's been a year, and I went from using the 110s to the 115s, yet I feel like it's been progressive overload.
There's nothing wrong with that. Think of it this way. Like, here's a way to sort of reframe that might make you feel better about that. So it's been a year. Let's say that you're someone who weighs 130 pounds. So obviously, let's say you weigh whatever. Let's say you weigh 130. So that means your fat-free mass is about 110 or 115.
Okay.
And over the course of 1 year, you go from a fat-free mass or a muscle mass, fat-free mass including muscle, of 110 to 115.
Yeah.
And the 5-pound difference is muscle mass.
Yeah.
So I'm using that analogy with the idea behind it being that progressive overload, an increase in performance, all the things being identical and absolutely equal, which you can never really say,
right,
is representative of increased muscle mass.
Yeah, yeah.
So if your form's the same, everything else is identical, and you go from a 225-pound bench to a 315-pound bench, that should be representative to some degree of muscle mass.
Yeah.
So if you're going from 110s to the 115s, and all other things being equal, that's a 5-pound jump. We can't necessarily do this. This is just sort of hypothetical. It's sort of way of our brains to sort of view this through this lens. But that would be kind of the same as someone who's like about 130, who has 100, who's, maybe 15%, 20% body fat, who goes from 110 pounds of fat-free mass to 115 pounds of fat-free mass. Yeah. That's 5 pounds of fat-free mass in 1 year for a very light person.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Who's advanced like you. Yeah. That would be like 10. That's like that 5 pounds is it's maybe a 9% increase over the course of a year. A 9% increase in fat-free mass in your whole body is a lot. Yeah, it's gigantic.
And I feel good about it. I feel really good about it.
Sorry, 5%, not 9%. Okay. I was flip-flopping the math in my head.
I just took your word for it. But I do. I feel good about it. And I guess the reason I wanted to bring it up is because, when we have talked a lot about progressive overload. And I think that a lot of times for the viewers, for the listeners, it can be a thought of that you have to be lifting more. You have to be lifting more and more constantly, that, each week you're lifting 5 more pounds and 5 more pounds and 5 more pounds. And then the argument comes in, well, you could only do that for so long. Otherwise everybody's going to be benching 1,000 pounds that does progressive overload. And, right. It's like, but no, this to me, I want people to understand that. And it's an experience I've had to go through myself to get it. But yeah, I've progressed. And I'll tell you what, man, I'm a lot stronger because so my next step, I don't have 120s at home, but I do have 125s. Mind you, by the way, all these dumbbells are 5 pounds heavier than what they say. So my 115s are actually 120s. and my 125s are actually 130s. So if I want to say,
do they have like the little Ivanko labels on them, or
they have a marker, like a white marker written?
If someone wrote it on there,
yeah, 115. And
that's because the handle weighs 5 pounds, and they didn't have the handle weight.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, that's just like someone who doesn't know how to like. Yeah.
I've noticed though at the gyms though, I've counted them, and a lot of gyms have the same thing. It'll say 100 pounds, but when I do the math, there's 100 pounds of weight on the bar on the handle, but the handle itself isn't being counted. So, and the handle's about like 4.5 pounds.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, but I'm confident though. I got the 115s for my top set for 10 reps, and they felt strong. So I there's days, and it was one of those days where I wasn't sure if it was going to be a great workout. I had one of my clients over. Shout out to Julian. He asked a lot of questions though. So while we're warming up, he's asking me questions, and I'm picking up like the 85s, and I'm listening to him talk, and I'm doing a few reps. And then finally it got to the point where like I'm getting ready to do my top set, and I was like, I got to stop. I got to focus. So ask me after this, because I'm about to do the heaviest thing I've ever done in my entire life, and then he got it, So, but I mean, he's a good guy. He just, he wants to learn, but then, I just had to tell him that so he understood. But I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't know if I'm in the right place, but by the time I was
it's dangerous.
By the time I got to the 105s, which I did a set for 2 reps with the 105s, just a feeder set. And when I picked them up, I could tell they felt light. There's days
post the video, like maybe what comes out on YouTube.
Okay, yeah. When I picked the 105s up, I could tell they felt light in my hand, like I could whip them up, off the rack. And I knew at that point, I knew that this is going to be a good one. And I lifted the most I've ever lifted in my life on dumbbell press yesterday, and it was an amazing feeling, like flat out. It was badass, and I know that the way that felt, if I could get 10 with the 115s, then I know that I could do the 125s. Within a few weeks, I'll be there. So I'm gonna, I think, taper back for a minute and deload for a minute.
Oh yeah, undulate a little bit.
Yes, and then I'm going to push back up. And when I do, I think if not this round, the next round, I think I'll get to the 125s.
I mean, you can actually just go and order the pro style plates to get some 120s if you want. You got a hex screw at the end of the dumbbells there, right? You
know what? Now that you mention it, I actually have the plates.
I figured you did. So you can just fashion those.
I guess I could, couldn't I?
Yeah. There you go.
I guess I could.
This is why they gave me PhD, because I figured these things out. You smart one, we give you PhD. You go tell people smart things.
I thought about getting the what do you call them, the plate mates, but those things are like $60 for little tiny additional magnetic things.
You can go to the hardware store and get like really big. There's all sorts of bits and pieces. You get some nice. Actually, I'll send you a link. There's some magnets. You can get some magnets that are just ridiculously strong, like the kind if you put them together, like you're not getting them apart.
No shit.
Yeah, like I've got some I picked up like that, like for putting mounting things on my RVs and various things that I don't want to come off. I've got one magnet that I screwed in on a rear view camera. Yeah, and the magnet's only it's like that big. It's maybe a centimeter by 3 or 4 centimeters, and I don't know how it's not even a half a centimeter thick. It's so strong. Yeah. And so you can get some really powerful magnets. You can order them and then just get some iron, like get some large washers, all sorts of things you can do to make your own plate mates.
That's cool.
Lots of people have done that, yeah.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I bet you if I looked online, I could probably find some insight on that.
Oh, yeah. We did that back in with DC training. That was the thing back in the day. When everyone, making your own plate mates so you can microload.
Yeah.
So people, like Jordan, I think it was actually on Fuad's podcast where Jordan was talking about he brings the smaller plates with him.
Oh yeah,
so that he can microload when he goes. And I've got those in my bag too. I've got a whole bunch of them from that I had at my gym.
Okay.
And so you can buy those, or you can make them, and like the pins that you with the post on it, you stick into the select drives machine so you can throw 45s.
Oh yeah.
People started making those, and Dante he has somebody out who he found anyone who could weld can make one of those. But there are all these little hacks, from 15 years ago with DC training as to how to microload, just doing exactly what you're talking about doing.
Yeah.
You get a little bit more. So like now you can go to the thing with the dumbbells can be the issues that like if you got to rest them on your thighs, you got plate mates on there, you end up digging in and as the plate mates, you don't want to have to worry about keeping a plate mate centered.
Yeah.
You know? So that's not the best idea.
At just Highland Park Powerhouse, they have the 200-pound dumbbells, and they're like handmade. They're like big pieces of steel with a rod in between, basically. And nice. I think one of them's even broken at this point. But there's duct tape all over them because people had taped 10-pound plates. To the outsides of them before. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep. I've seen that quite a few times.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
I've heard stories of that in jail that people would, because when the dumbbells break, they're done, but they would tape plates to make them heavier and stuff like that. Yeah. So
there was a guy on Professional Muscle, Justin Rice. He's now passed on. He's a really nice guy. He came down with some sort of neurological disorder. He was just like, he pushed the limits at everything he did. Yeah. But he's a super nice guy. And he was in jail for a while. I think recreational drug dealing or use or both.
Yeah.
But he was giant. Like there was a picture of him standing next to Ronnie in Ronnie's heyday, and they're about the same size.
Yeah,
he'd have Ronnie's shape, but it was just crazy. He was the guy I mentioned before. He started training with weights. He was a sprinter for New Zealand, and he put on 50 pounds of muscle in the first 6 months, natural.
Holy crap!
And then you heard that these steroids help you get stronger and bigger too. So he threw in some who knows what, and he gained another 50 pounds.
Yeah.
The next 6 months, he gained 100 pounds in the first year of training.
Oh my God!
Pretty good genetics.
I guess so. Yeah.
405 pound behind the neck presses.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. But he talked about in jail, like I think he called them like totem pole squats. These guys would do. So one guy would get on another guy's shoulders.
Oh yeah.
And then like another guy would get underneath that guy, so he would do squats like with two people sitting on top of one another, and they go into like a corner, they find like a pillar somewhere for the sake of balance.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
He'd have 200, he'd have 400 pounds on his back.
Yeah,
200-pound dudes or whatever, or bigger.
That's
and
crazy.
He'd squat that way. I know.
That's crazy.
So yeah, you make that shit work,
Yeah.
So.
I did a whole podcast back at the beginning of Advices, and I had 4 different people on who had been in prison, and John Romano was one of them actually, and we talked about all the different aspects. But that's a whole other story. What do you say we get to a few of these questions?
All right. Done for a while already.
Let's see. Oh yeah, we are like an hour in already. But we still have people watching. I have the time if you have the time here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Since we're talking about training, I'm going to bring up this question because I just saw it was training related. He says, question for Dr. Scott, as soon as gyms reopen, I'm starting fortitude training with multiple basic blast and test the different volume tiers. I'll do everything by the book, but I have only one issue. I love going to the gym. It's part of the routine, maximum or minimum 5 times a week. So in conclusion, when I bastardized the basic version to a 5 times a week, splitting the muscle round days 3 and 4, he wants to know if you can split the muscle rounds into 3 days instead of 2. Maybe doing legs, then back, chest, delts, then arms and abs. Did you ever have anyone training fortitude 5 or even 6 times per week? And if yes, how did they manage the split? P.S. Maybe add some niche or particular suggestions to a newbie to fortitude. Something not in your books that you wouldn't mind sharing out of experience.
Okay, so I'm going to be direct and upfront.
Okay.
I'm going to make this sort of maybe one of my simplest answers. Is my guess from what he's saying, and I've looked at Anthony's Facebook profile.
Okay.
Is that short and sweet is it doesn't matter.
Okay.
It doesn't, and here's why I say this. This is sort of like this is the super tough love answer. Is I'm looking at him and he looks as if he prefers, and there's nothing wrong with this. He prefers going to the gym as opposed to getting after it and making the most gains he possibly can. Because he looks like he's a very young guy. In his profile picture, he looks, I can't tell. He looks like he's. If you told me he never trained, I wouldn't bet against that.
Okay.
So there's not a huge. My guess is just from the look of his profile is that he wants to just be able to go in and train and enjoy himself as much as possible.
Okay.
So all the rhyme and reason as to why, training as hard as you can, having days off and rest and recovery, it may not apply to him whatsoever. Just guessing.
Okay.
And that's kind of what he says is like he can't keep away from the gym.
Yeah.
And if someone were making great gains that way, then you want to accommodate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I'm saying here is I don't think, from judging from what he looks like, I may be totally off here. He's not making great gains, but he prefers rather to get to the gym. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're ahead of 95% of the population because you're training, so friggin' do it.
Yeah.
Easiest way to do that is you just take day 1 and day 2, the loading sets and pump sets, you split them up.
Okay.
So day 1 is loading sets, lower, pump sets, upper. You do that on Monday, and then you do the upper body on Tuesday. Then you take Wednesday's workout, spread it over Wednesday and Thursday, and then you do days 3 and day 4 on Friday and Saturday. That gives you 6 days in the gym. Okay. I get asked this question all the time. So that gets you in the gym.
Yeah. No.
But the whole ethos of that question and what I'm seeing from his profile, and I hate to do this, but I want to I'm answering this question towards the general population, and this is almost like someone fabricated this question so I can address this topic.
Okay.
Is that there's a different. It kind of depends on where you are on that spectrum of trying to make the best progress you possibly can versus I want to go in the gym and feed that need and urge that I have to train and what that does for me psychologically, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I want to be in the gym and I just can't help myself versus I want to make the best gains I possibly can.
Yeah.
And one more thing, I know you got something to say, but the other thing is that the thing that a lot of people don't recognize is that if you go in and you train as hard as you possibly can, you're going to need those off days. Most people.
Yeah.
Not everyone. There's lots of pros. Brandon Curry, we talked about this when he was on the podcast. Ronnie Coleman have tremendous recovery abilities, and they can get away with training more regularly. But a lot of people, if they go in and give it all they possibly can, those off days have to happen. That's when you grow.
Yeah.
So he's along that spectrum where he wants to be able to train and go in the gym and get all the benefits that come from regular training and make some progress. But my guess is that there would be no point in me trying to convince him to just stick with the 4 day a week, train as hard as you can, and go for the progress, because that's not the path that he's more devoted to.
I like the psychology of this. I like the psychology of it. Yeah. I do because hey, yeah. it's up to him now. What does he prefer? What does he want? Yeah. if and I think you're absolutely right that if it's I think that you've helped me to understand this, Scott, that what we get different things out of the gym, and it's not my place to tell you what to get out of the gym. Now, if you want to train like me, and you want to have the same goals that I have, then you're not going to want to train as often. You can't. The workout I just talked about, that was 4 sets for chest. It was 2 sets for dumbbell incline press, and then 2 sets on my machine, my new F-Lite chest converging chest press, which is, I love it, by the way. But that was it. It was 4 working sets, and I won't train chest again for a little while and I'm not training at all today. I've been training every other day, and that's working out pretty smoothly for me. So, but my goals are probably different than his. So there's that.
Yeah. Well, the thing, because I have seen this question. You're totally right. Thanks for kind of confirming that I'm on the right track with the way I'm looking at this. I've seen literally the same question about every 6 months for the last 5 or 6 years, it comes up repeatedly.
Yeah.
And there's an easy way to do it. We had it on the podcast here maybe 2 months ago. Someone wanted to want to split up. And he actually decided to not do that. He had a reason, because I can't remember his name. You knew this poster, and the name rang a bell, but you would know who he is immediately if I could remember his name. Yeah. But he was in his 40s, maybe, older guy in the grand scheme of things. I can say that because I'm an old guy. And he had only X number of minutes, only X amount of time. Like the gym opened at 6 and he had to go to work. So he looked like he could get up earlier and train longer. He had no choice, given family, et cetera, et cetera. So I gave him this possibility. He found out a way to make it work. Mm-hmm. I think he stuck with a 4-day a week so he could get that recovery in. Yeah. But this was a thing with DC training. I thought there was a DC training question there somewhere too.
Yeah,
is that
there is.
People would, back in the day, and they would just get jumped on by the DC Nazis and say, do it the way Dante said, and follow that first. Yeah. They'd want to go in and immediately change things. And someone has been training for a year and a half or whatever, and they want to just do something different. Yeah. And what happens, and this is a point I make a lot with fortitude training. If you're on my board, for what it's worth, people don't always know this. If you buy the fortitude training book, read the purchase email. It gives you instructions to get on my discussion board. I go on there every single day and answer questions if there are questions there. I've answered every question related to DC or fortitude training that I can think of. And what happens is if you go on there and you have questions, that you can obviously find answers to those questions, but you also have all the people who have had logs, other people who have done fortitude training the way I have. You have this collective consciousness of people with that same experience using the 4-day-a-week split or 4-day-a-week training approach with the basic and the turbo versions, with whom you can compare notes. But if you go and start changing things up and doing things different, then you're sort of an island. Yeah. And it's really helpful if you're, someone who's relatively new to this, to be able to say, I did Mad Cow's 5x5, or I did Jim Wentler's 531, or I did hypertrophy specific training, or did DC training, or this mountain dog training version, or JP's training, whatever. And I did it just the way, and someone says, oh, I find I can't do that hip hinge movement followed by this hip hinge movement those 2 days in a row. That was a big no-no for me. I just switched it around like this. Okay, yeah, cool. That insight could only come if you're actually following the program the way it was written out, the way all those other thousands of people have done it. Yeah, yeah. But when you start going in, if you went in literally, let's say volume tier 1 was the best one for you, generally speaking, in fortitude training. So that's the least amount of volume. And that's just what would be best, training 4 times a week. But you want to go in and train 6 times a week. Yeah. Well, that's not really shit on those days, other days. What this strategy of taking day 1, splitting out over Monday and Tuesday, and day 2, splitting out over Wednesday and Thursday, having those 2 workouts means each of those workouts is pretty pitiful. Yeah. For some, by them, they're still hard, but they're very, very short. Yeah. Put them together and it's much more reasonable. Go to volume tier 3 and they can be, relatively long depending on the person. Yeah. But they can still be done. Obviously, many, many, many people have done that. But if volume tier 1, let's take this sort of one end of the spectrum scenario, is split out, you're not doing a whole heck of a lot. It's like 1 set for chest. Yeah. 2 sets for back on the loading sets, and you're done. Well, that person who really likes to be in the gym, what are they going to do? I'm going to do a little bit more. They just end up doing other, and next thing you know, they're trying to do volume tier 3 when, and training more often, and now they say, well, Mike Israetel says that, and I'm not picking on Mike, but he's one of the loudest. We're everyone says volume is the driver of hypertrophy, so more volume is better. I should probably do that. Yeah, okay,
yeah, cool. Yeah.
But what that ends up meaning is over the course of a week, they're having fewer of those days off. And there's something to say for the day off where you can just have a complete day off, psychologically and otherwise, because you come in rip roaring ready to go the next day most of the time. Yeah. But now you've increased. Now you may, because you're feeding that desire to just be in the gym and doing things. You may be doing double the volume that would be best for you, because you're still training those muscle groups that many times over the course of that week. Mm-hmm. So it's still, you're doing volume tier 1 compared with volume tier 2. Those volume tiers the training is over those would be 4 sessions. You're taking it over 6. Now you're doing twice the volume in the same period of time. Even though you spread it over more days and those workouts don't feel as strenuous because of that in a certain way, you haven't made the weeks longer and given yourself more recovery time.
Mm-hmm.
You've just increased the volume, perhaps beyond what is optimal for your recovery and making progress.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason being because you want to be in the gym more frequently, and you start doing more, and you're looking at it from the standpoint of a single. I want to say the word in German is a Trainingseinheit, like a training singularity, a training session. I want to have each session needs to be good and awesome. Well, you can go in on Monday and have a badass training session, so that it was so damn good, you're like, I think I could use a break today. I'm looking forward to this. But when you come back on Wednesday, you're like, I'm ready to kick some ass again.
Yeah.
That's what I would rather have people doing, chomping at the bit, maybe training a little bit less and wanting to train as hard as they possibly can. That's what DC training, that's why DC training works for so many people, because it's even, you could say lesser volume, the frequency is a little bit less than how fortitude would be done depending on which volume tier you use, because you're like, I'm training chest on Monday. I'm doing the two-way split DC training, let's say, hypothetically, Monday and then Friday. I've got one rest pause set for chest to do. One. This is it. I got these next 2 minutes. It's like that Eminem song, whatever, I can't remember the words exactly, but you got one shot,
Yeah.
One chance, and you got to make it happen. And if you don't, get like, I'm going to do a do-over. I'm going to just go do some more. Let's do a couple sets of pec flies or something. It's like,
Yeah.
You got to make that shit happen. If you got to get one more rep, 2 more reps each time.
It was like you said when we were at, we went and trained at Metro Fitness together at I think it was a couple years ago at the Arnold. And you said down in Columbus, Mike Davies' gym. Metro Fitness West, I think it is, or Worthington.
That's where John used to live. I don't remember which one it was. But
Worthington. Yeah. He said, Scott said to me, it was like, well, we could pick a couple exercises and we could really go to town on those, do a couple of hard sets, or we could do some bullshit all around the gym for the next couple hours. Those are basically your words.
Yeah.
And I think we did it. We ended up doing like 3 sets.
Do stuff out. Yeah.
I think we did like 3 sets. It was a good workout, though. I think that it's something that takes time to understand. To be able to. It's hard to tell somebody to get more out of less. It's something you couldn't have told me. It's from the time you started telling me about it. Actually, I should say from the time I started listening. That was 2017 at the end of my last show in November. And from there, I started splitting chest up into 2 different days per week. And I saw how getting more out of less made sense. And over time, I had to learn for myself. But it took years to get to like where I'm at today,
And I got to tell Anthony, this is not the pot calling the kettle black. I am the worst. I was the worst of anyone I know.
Yeah.
Because I used to think, if I can just, eventually my body will have to adapt. The more I do, it will have no choice in the matter. I could manage you to grow long before CT Fletcher. It didn't work. I would do 20 sets of 20 rep squats.
Yeah.
I trained that way for a while. Just all this crazy asinine stuff. Like, it was amazing that I just wasn't like a heaping, like mass of like torn connective tissue,
Yeah.
But I did that. I love going to the gym. Absolutely. I mean, I'm on the same page.
Yeah.
But I had to kind of, figure that out. So what I'm telling you is sort of like me, telling my younger self the words of wisdom that I wish I could have passed on way back when. It would have saved me like at least way over a decade of training, because I trained like an idiot for a long time. I learned how to train really hard. It was just always sort of my natural inclination, but way too much. I wanted to be in the gym every day. When I was in grad school, I did that. I trained every day for like 2 years straight. It wasn't very much, but I needed that. It didn't matter what time. I always made that time for me. That was so much therapeutic. I knew I was going to make gains because of the way the work schedule. But so there was a reason for that. But I'm definitely not looking down on. There's a reason that question gets asked so regularly. It's because it is therefore de facto a good question.
Yeah,
because it's one that many people have.
Yeah,
it's one that I would have given the same answer to myself about. So I'm not picking on him. That's and the thing is, I hope me sort of digging in and like, vetting him out a little bit, looking at his picture, it's like, who knows? Maybe he'll, flip things around and come to realize, he likes training, obviously.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll start to figure out I like training really, really hard and growing
Yeah.
really, really optimally, so to speak, or better than he has been by not going in there so often, having those off days.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll get turned on to that, and then 5 years be like, oh, Jesus, I'm so glad that Scott picked on me on the podcast because it made a difference.
Let's see if we have time for another one here. Max Holiday says, understanding the thought process behind DC training, how beneficial would a 2 or 3-way split be for a guy over 50 from a gaining size / muscle perspective? FYI, 40 plus years training with multiple DC cycles under my belt since 2008.
Well, he kind of tells me his experience is better than mine. He can answer that question much better than I can, right?
I guess so, yeah.
40 plus years of training. That sounds kind of like me, and he's understanding the thought process, how beneficial. So here's kind of the issue. Dante actually has addressed this with the other splits that he puts forth for guys who want to do DC training, like the five-way split. Some of that is for more advanced guys. This is one of the things that Jordan has kind of figured out to some degree, is that he can't recover from the higher frequency. And one issue too is that the more advanced you get, the more you have to do in terms of training really hard and the appropriate amount of volume in order to make a given training session for a given muscle group an actual growth stimulus. So it may be that you have to put in so much on a particular day that you go into the gym for that muscle group to get anything that constitutes a real growth stimulus, that you have to take more than 2 or 3 days off, which I think is, and I can't speak for Dante, obviously. I'm not his guy. He was the DC trainer for a while, but I think that's part of the reason, at least, why his other splits now are like 5-way splits and those sorts of things.
Okay.
The other thing about doing DC training when you get older is the reps. It makes more sense for the rep ranges to go up. 40 years of training, I'm sure Max knows this. Your low back, your joints, your tendons, your connective tissue. There is an aging, like one of the, just kind of an aside, like one of the kind of main theories of aging to some degree has to do with free radicals. Like you can take like Drosophila melanogaster, like you can that's a fancy word for mosquito, and make transgenic animal models that have very few that handle free radicals really well, and they live longer. So free radical stress is one thing that is involved with aging, and free radical stress is not good for proteins in terms of their mechanical abilities to withstand stress, which is the purpose of connective tissue proteins. So we get older and our things get more brittle. Is a fancy way of just saying that. Joints don't have what they used to have. They get worn down, et cetera. Yeah. So training, trying to pull 6 to 8 rep range heavy loads doesn't make sense. And I say the same thing for fortitude training. Adjust all those things upward. I got things built into the system so that you don't train with those heavy loads. Okay. Because there's some fatigue, even with the loading sets, there's some fatigue intentionally built into the rest intervals, so the loads have to be a little bit lighter than that true 6 to 8 rep range. So you'd have to go lighter. I would suggest looking at go on intense muscle. There may be some things on professional muscle, but intense muscle's got all Dante's like major stuff. Okay. And look for like the 5-way split. But Max pretty much gave me the answer there, Yeah. So here's the thing. Dante's written about this extensively, and funny because Jordan's doing the same thing. I'm a member at Jordan's site, and I go and check in on him and his training logs. And just happened to look the other day, and he's doing some things to create novelty of stimulus because he has to, where he does like some pauses, like he calls them a squeeze. So he's literally doing squeezing, which probably 5 years ago he would have laughed at himself for writing, but he's doing like sets of, I think he was doing sets of 6 with like a 2-second hold.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. This is heavy ass shit. Now
we're
not talking, he's not picking up pink dumbbells here.
Right.
We're talking about moving massive amounts of weight, but he's got eventually you do. There is some logic to say, yeah, you're not going to find someone who's, squatting, Venus by, squatting Saturn standing on Venus, because they've gotten so strong, that they're now a character from a Marvel comic, strip. You can only lift so much weight, eventually you run out, but you can keep upping the ante. So once you've gotten to where you're doing 600-pound squats with a good controlled rep tempo in a way that targets the muscles of the legs, if that's what you're doing it for, now you start, going down and doing like 1 second pauses in the hole.
Yeah.
You're not resting on the connective tissue of your knees, or you do slower descents, or if you're doing like some sort of biceps curl, you do a 1 second pause, something like that. That's what I have built into fortitude training with the pump sets. So there's various variations. DC training has that flexibility built into it, because DC training is whatever Dante says DC training is, and he's put those things out. I in part, I hate to say this, but it's true. I've said it many times. Is fortitude training was in part created for me, so I could take those quintessential aspects of DC training, the high rep sets like a Widowmaker, but lay off the nervous system. So don't make those drag on as discontinuous sets, and the heavy loading sets that are progressively overloaded. But you can't, if you do, let's say you do 3 sets. Let's say you're on a higher volume, so you're going to use squats for your loading sets, and you've got a 6 to 12 rep range. Well, your first set is going to have 1 or 2 reps in the tank. So if you're in that rep range, you're an older guy, well, you stay in that 10 to 12 rep range, but actually that's like a 14 rep max load if you get 12 reps and you leave 2 reps in the tank, and you're at the top. In the next set, you're going to have to come down and load. You're still doing a set of 10, leaving 1 or 2 reps in the tank, but now you're using what would be, if you did DC training or some other training system where you rest completely between those sets, now you're using much less weight, but you're still training in at a higher rep range, and you can still progressively overload. So you're lightening the load a little bit. You're not going like with pansy weights, staying at the upper range of that heavy loading set rep range. But you got a little bit of fatigue built into there, a little bit of reps in reserve. You're being a little bit easier on the nervous system, which doesn't recover quite the same. So you're taking care of your skeletal system, trying to tax the muscular system and lay off the nervous system, the endocrine system, the immune system as much as possible.
Yeah.
So I built fortitude training kind of because I had that kind of same question. It's how can I continue doing all the shit that I love about DC training as long as possible, and the whole story we've gone through a million times. But so I'm not against someone making their own hybrid. He's been at it for 40 years. He's done multiple DC training. If he hasn't tried fortitude training, give that a go. The weight's written for a couple blasts, and then he might be like, I like the muscle rounds better than rest pause sets. I like the pump sets better than Widowmakers. But I like the way DC does, the upper lower 3 times a week.
Oh,
I want to do it that way.
He added, was thinking more from a hormone aspect, taking TRT.
This is Max?
Yeah. So he says, okay, going back to that initial question. So if I apply that, understanding the thought process behind DC training, how beneficial would a 2 or 3 way split be for a guy over 50 with gaining muscle size? So there's age and there's hormonal status, natty or enhanced. Yeah. So sounds like he's on TRT then.
Yeah. So maybe he wasn't previously. Dante has had lots of guys who were natural.
Okay.
That was one of the things people said, you can't do this unless you're enhanced. And it's you can. You certainly can.
I've heard people say the same thing about HIIT training. It only worked for the guys that were taking a ton of gear.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if the HIIT training, there's something to say for that argument, I think more so because we know, just for instance, from the Boston study where they, there's a study, the classic study, they gave 600 milligrams of testosterone per week. They had 4 groups, college age guys, training and no training, and then testosterone, placebo. Okay. And the no training testosterone grew as much as the training no placebo. Oh, essentially. Okay. So gear in of itself can make you grow. is what the bottom line comes from that. So yes, you can do a training program that's asinine for whatever reason, and some people might consider an HIIT training program where you train once every 3 weeks with one set asinine. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but if you could have a very much suboptimal training regime and still get growth by putting in lots of gear.
Yeah, okay.
And we can say that. So that's why, but DC training is not a suboptimal training program.
Yeah.
It's brutal training program. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, to be honest, in my mind, unless you just go from pristine form to like sloppy, biggest asshole in the gym form. If you've gone from 225-pound presses to 315-pound presses and 365-pound squats to 495-pound squats and pulling 405 to pulling 585 over the course of 2 years.
Yeah.
All other things being relatively equal, you're going to be a bigger dude.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Within what your genetics allow. Gear or not.
Right.
Yeah, So DC training relies upon that. And there's just like there's a logic to that which is just so exquisite and so beautiful.
Yeah.
That is not beautiful unless you're willing to do the kind of things that, hopefully people see that video of you doing where you dig in and you say, okay, it's me versus gravity. Who's going to be the bitch today?
Yeah.
And you make gravity, your bitch for a couple minutes.
Right.
Until
I can't.
Yeah. And you just keep on doing that, like in a methodical, like keep grinding away sort of way, and you're going to get stronger and you get bigger. Even if it's just 5% increase in muscle mass this is where I came up with that 9 pound, or 9% when I meant to say 9 pounds, 5% increase in muscle mass for a guy who's like 220, 240 is over it's like 10 pounds of muscle mass. That's a shitload.
Yeah, I could tell that I'm gaining too. That's the other thing. The reason I'm doing it is
we're commenting like, did you look monstrous?
Yeah. I'll take it. And that's so. Here's the thing: is that I've been doing this for a long time. I've been lifting weights for a long time, and the last couple of years I hadn't been eating as much. I hadn't been pushing to grow, but I still have the experience. And I can tell you that I realized that I was being limited. It wasn't limited by the drugs. It wasn't limited by the food. That it was my training was when I put all the pieces together, the training was subpar. And I think that was the thing I really needed to change. And now I think that that's been the factor that's helping. So, and now I'm adding the gear to it too. Cause with this week I added 100 milligrams of ment, the trestolone acetate, or excuse me, the long acting trestolone enanthate.
It's interesting. Well, it'll be interesting to see, because there's Victor Black just put a post up about ment.
Yeah.
Did you see my response?
No, I didn't see your response.
Okay, I've just put up a response last night because I still agree with his general point for some people, not always, that ment can be good or bad. Seems like it's hit or miss.
Yeah.
Some people don't like it, but anyway, you can hear my response. I broke down. He didn't put the actual citations that he was drawing from in that post, and I dug them up.
Okay.
And sort of extrapolated the math, and people can go and look that up if they want. But the bottom line was that the study looking at hepatotoxicity was in rabbits, not in humans.
Okay.
And if we translate that back down, there was really no hepatotoxicity given the measures they had in the human equivalent dose of like 200 milligrams of ment per week.
Okay.
But that's translating, assuming that the way the liver handles those things in rabbits versus humans obeys that general, which is a body surface area based translation, but it's the best we have. It's a bunch of assumptions, and you can follow along, but it's interesting that you mentioned ment, because that was just literally half an hour before we came on here, I posted something on that thread about ment.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out then. But I'll tell you what, though, so just with 100 milligrams, I think that's 1 week in now. I think that's been part of, obviously, I've laid the foundation, I've learned how to train right, to get the most out of what I'm doing. And it's like, now I'm turning up the gas on it. So I think that's definitely, I think it's already increased my strength for sure.
And let me add one thing too, related to maxes, that I wanted to just kind of say is that if you're progressive overload can happen in those more subtle ways. We talk about Jordan doing the holds and those sorts of things, but simply lightening the load. If you're training the 12 to 15 rep range, or the 10 to 12 rep range versus the 6 to 8, which you may have done, back in the day, and you're doing sets of 10 with the 115s or 120s, whatever they actually are.
Yeah.
And you stick with those sets of 10. If you were doing sets of 15 and you also progressed, from with 100 pounds to 120 pounds for sets of 15, and you progressed from 10 reps with 115 to the 125s over the same period of time, you're going to make gains with both of those. There might be some subtle differences. Maybe some people getting better with heavier versus lighter. But if you're making gains, it's still going to translate, all other things being equal, keeping the form the same, this sort of thing. So training lighter and adjusting the loads relative to what your skeletal system can handle, because you're 50 and you're on TRT, and dropping the volume down, that's going to be one thing probably that may or may not have to happen. There's an interesting paradox there, because if you're enhanced, you're going to use heavier loads because you're stronger and you'll tend to be bigger, which is more taxing. And versus if you're TRT or natural, lighter loads, less taxing because of that. So it could be that the amount of recovery that you're getting from the gear is just matching the taxation that comes from being able to train so much heavier.
Yeah, right.
In a way that it basically doesn't have that gigantic of an effect on training volume.
Yeah, right.
So
right.
The guy who's squatting 600 may be able to get away with 5 sets a week, but the guy who squats 315 may only be able to get away with 5 sets a week as well. They're both training as hard as they possibly can. One guy's enhanced, that's why he can do that.
Yeah.
But he also has greater inroads to recover from. So DC training works for natties and works for guys who are enhanced. Just got to progress.
Right on. All right.
Be smart.
Well, let's get out of here. We've covered a lot, guys.
It was fun.
We'll try to hold on to these questions, and if you're interested, we'll cover them the next time we get together.
And I have to say, I'm sorry. I had all those ones from Instagram, and those people, I didn't answer any of those, did we? I don't think.
No, we could do another one if you want. If we want to try to come back and just knock out a Q&A or something sometime before the next episode, if you have the time, let me know. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I know, because you got to roll, but yeah, we can maybe do another one. Maybe I'll do an Instagram Q&A.
There you go. You could do that.
People. Yeah, I can do that.
All right, guys. Well, for another episode of Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson, I'm Scott McNally. Of course, check out our great sponsor, TrueNutrition.com, and you can use our code ADVICES. You'll get some additional savings on that. Plus, you support our podcasting, and you support a great company, too. All their stuff is third-party tested, high-quality supplements. And, of course, go to BYOBBcoach.com. You can check out Dr. Scott's book there. And, of course, go to FortitudeTraining.net. All the Fortitude Training stuff we're talking about today. All right, guys. We'll see you soon. Thanks, Scott.
Adios. Thanks, guys.